Today on Isolation Nation, BC Lions All-Star quarterback Mike Reilly. We're not talking about what's on his head, but what's in his head. And yeah, he'll talk to us about why we shouldn't panic about our panic. And Georges Laraque, COVID-19 did what no one in the NHL could ever do: kick his ass.
I can't even get up without losing my breath. It's insane.
If you thought he was tough before, wait till you see him now. Plus, Sean Cullen serenading our guests again. Last week, we heard this.
Serena Ryder, she's on the show. We went to the same high school, don't you know?
As for today, you gotta wait and see. And our first in a series of how not to hear this when people look at your hair. Cindy Duplantis with one key tip.
Have you ever wanted to cut your own hair? Well, I'm going to answer that later on.
Cindy's awesome, but it's not like I need to hear it. I mean, my hair, pretty good. Really, Goat? We give you your big break and that's what you give us? Yeah, look at us, Isolation Nation, Sick Not Weak, bringing a sense of immaturity to mental health. Hey, folks, how you doing? You know, I don't ask that question often enough. Obviously, it's rhetorical, unless you want to, track me down and say, you know what, I'm doing okay, or I'm struggling. One of the things that we have learned at Sick Not Weak, and one of the things that I've learned over the years, is to not really accept the first answer. Typically, you'll hear a conversation where you'll say, how you doing? No, I'm okay. Yeah, I'm okay. And very often I have learned to pursue that by saying, well, what does that mean? I'm okay. Okay really says nothing, or I'm fine. That really says nothing. So when I ask guests on the show how they're doing, I really want to know how they're doing. And Mike Reilly, I'll be asking him that question in a couple of minutes. But right now, I'm going to ask it to a guy who was my buddy for years on Off the Record. Love this man, Georges Laraque. He has been in my house. In fact, he almost choked me out in my house. George, how you doing, man?
I'm awesome, Michael. How you doing? Thanks for having me.
Yeah, you do remember doing that, right? When you put your hands around my neck like this. I'm still haunted by it, just so you know. I was mentally fine before that, and since then.
Yes, I do remember. We spent a lot of years together when you were in the show, and the show that you actually pretty much never missed a day, and came over your place and stuff. No, it was those fun days. There was fun days. We had George and Pierre with us a couple times, and. No, I loved it. And you gave me the honor to host it one time, so I thank you for that.
So, George, let's start with the question, how you doing? And we're talking physically now, first of all. Normally on this show, we don't necessarily talk about physically, but how you doing? COVID-19, hospitalized for 5 days? Wow.
Yeah, I was one of the guys that never thought it was going to happen to me. I never thought I was going to get infected. I'm healthy, I'm vegan. I was like, I even thought it was blown out of proportion and hit me right in the face. I'm asthmatic, so the first 2 days I actually needed oxygen to breathe. I was getting pumped 3 liters of oxygen through my nose for the first couple of days until my lungs calmed down. But now, the worst is done. I'm almost 100% right now. I still have pneumonia. It's going to take a while for my lungs to be 100%, but at least now I feel much better compared to the first few days when I got it. I feel like $1 million.
And so when did you get out? I know it was sometime last week, so I'm just wondering how long you've been home for.
Yeah, no, I've been home for exactly a week now. I have to do a 2 weeks confinement. All the neighbors are looking at me every time I go to the garbage to see if I'm going to go further than that. It's everybody's checking me out right now to make sure that I'm not going anywhere. And obviously, I know I'm so recognizable, so I wouldn't go anywhere. But no, it shows you how worried people are, and they want to make sure that you respect the confinement.
Yeah, I mean, it's a really scary time, and we kind of all have the ability to impact other people's lives, right? You see someone not respecting the social distancing, and you go, dude, like, you're not just affecting yourself; it's all of us. And I guess let's take this to mental health and how you're doing with that. I mean, it's I know that you didn't suffer from what people would say would be anxiety, the illness beforehand. You were saying, and you've expressed this really well, and I think educated people on what it's like to be a fighter in the NHL. But I mean, you said that a couple of days before a game, when you knew you'd be fighting, you felt a ton of anxiety, correct?
Yeah, yeah. And you know, it's a different type of anxiety. And for people to understand, to put this in perspective, imagine going to school the next day, and after school, the biggest guy in the school is waiting for you and he wants to fight you. In the NHL, that anxiety before every game that you have, not knowing if you're going to fight, not knowing what's going to happen, if you're going to get hurt, because you could die in a fight. And that anxiety is quite big. And just so people can understand how hard it is mentally to every day, every game in and out, to think about fighting, to think if it's going to happen or not, the anxiety that it gives you. There's many guys that we lost that were coping that anxiety with drugs, with alcohol, and the accumulation of that every game in and on. Some of them, it affect their health. Some guys, unfortunately, we lost, they committed suicide. And that's what that does. Anxiety, there's tons of different level of it, but it's also how you cope with it. If you do it, if you find the right medication or the right way to deal with it, because it's something serious. And every combatant, it doesn't matter any sport of combat that you look at, we all kind of suffer a form of anxiety to do this job, and everybody use different method to deal with it.
Right. And so how did you cope with it? You expressed so well how difficult it was, and how, people make the assumption, especially with you, right? Most
Yes.
of the time you were a guy who was the better fighter on the ice, right? The bigger guy, the stronger guy, which puts added pressure on you, right? Like, you can't afford to lose one fight. And if you do, people go, what the hell happened to Georges Laraque?
Actually, the trick that I use is different to a lot of the other guys. I know most of the guys that did the job, and a lot of them were doing, whether it's steroid, drugs, alcohol, they were doing all that stuff. I didn't touch any of that. What I did to cope with that is I did as many hospitals visits as I could. And the reason why I did that is because every time I went to a hospital to see a kid, and I saw a kid fighting for their life after they got surgery, or a kid that was sick, what I was doing is I was kind of like looking at a kid that would rather be fighting on the ice other than fighting for his own life at the hospital. So it made me rationalize what I was doing, to realize that even though I was doing a tough job, I was lucky not to be in this place in the hospital. The more charity stuff that I did, the better I was coping with my anxiety, because then I would close my eyes. If I was nervous about, let's say, facing Donald Brashear, I was like, okay, remember last night you went to see this kid and you said the next fight is going to be for him. You would rather be in your place than the place that is in now. And that's how I cope with that. And by doing more and more of that, I became to realize how lucky that I was to do the job that I was doing, other than feeling the anxiety. I know it's something quite crazy and technical, but we all had our own trick. But me, that's the trick that worked for me, and that kept me away from drug and alcohol to be able to deal with that.
George, wow. I mean, I never heard you say that before. And that is a description of something that I've never heard before, but the theory in general that I've experienced and that I encourage people to do is get out of your own head. And the best way to do that is to dedicate yourself to something other than yourself, because that forces you, not to repeat the same thoughts over and over again. Okay, hold on one sec, George. I'm going to tell Phil, we're going to roll. Sean Cullen, Canadian singer, but mostly comedian, stand-up. He's a fan of yours. He does a song or a segment for us almost every day. And this is for you, George. So we'll leave you up, and feel free to react and laugh or cry or whatever you want. Roll it, Phil.
Michael, it's Sean. How are you? And I understand you have Georges Laraque on the show, and I'm a huge fan. I think he's a great man. And I think he's misunderstood. And so I wrote this ballad for him. This is the ballad of Georges Laraque. If you fight with him, you're gonna get a shock. He'd pound you with his fists of steel. The fight is strong and the pain is real. From Georges Laraque. Played for Edmonton and Montreal. All the big bruisers, he'd fight them all. But that was not what he wanted to do. He wanted to be a friend to me and you, this Georges Laraque. He'd help everybody whatever he can. He helped the people of his native land.
Yeah.
He helped the people of Haiti, and I thought he was great. Oh, Georges Laraque. He fights for our mental health, 'cause he's had problems to deal with himself. He's a noble and good man, and he seems to understand this Georges Laraque. So if you see him in the street, say hello, you might just meet a friendly guy with lots of grace, or he might just punch your face. He's Georges Laraque. Georges Laraque. Georges Laraque.
Wow. Good job, bro. Amazing.
Yeah, it's pretty good. It's pretty good. He's a fan of yours, Sean Cullen, and he makes these songs up off the top of his head. Now, I don't.
That was freestyle.
That almost. Right. So he said,
Wow.
okay, I got it. And then 10 minutes later, he sends me, an email with in Dropbox with that in it. But
Wow.
who did that sound like to you? Like, I have this sound in my voice. I'll ask Mike Reilly too. By the way, let's chat with Mike right now. Hey, Mike Reilly.
Hey, how are you?
I'm good. Are you a country music fan at all?
Growing up, the only music that was on in my parents' van when they would drive around was country music. So I'm not necessarily familiar with the current country songs that are out there, but any kind of old school Garth Brooks, I could probably still sing it.
Okay, well that's it's old school that's in my head. That to me, it kind of sounded like Johnny Cash. Like, I'm not saying that Sean Cullen is Johnny Cash, but just the way Georges Laraque.
I could see it.
How you doing, Mike?
I'm doing great. Thank you for asking. And as you mentioned, when you ask people that, they kind of just are always going to say, I'm okay. But I've had that question asked a lot on different Zoom calls and things like that. And I don't think you take that answer for granted anymore, living in the COVID-19 era that we're living in.
You would never, of course, have met Georges Laraque before. You guys both played in Edmonton. I would imagine, George, you left Edmonton in what year? Long before Mike got there, I would imagine. What year was your last year in Edmonton?
At the last Stanley Cup run in the final, it was 2006.
I still can't believe the Edmonton Oilers made a run to the Stanley Cup in 2006. Like, it seems like that came from nowhere. Wow. Mike, are you a hockey fan at all?
I am. I love hockey. I don't, growing up in the States and in Washington State, we didn't really have hockey to be able to watch, although we are getting an NHL team in Seattle here.
Yep.
I think, once you play in the CFL, if you spend any time in Canada, and certainly being in Edmonton for 6 years, you get to watch a lot of hockey and a lot of good hockey between Vancouver and Edmonton. I became a fan for sure. I still don't understand the strategy all that well. I don't know what makes a team good versus not good, but I know the rules well enough to enjoy watching the game, and I do find it to be a lot of fun.
Right. And you're also, a smart guy. So you understand, if you're making your living in Canada, you say, even if you hate hockey, you don't say, I hate hockey. You say, like, oh yeah, I'm a big fan of hockey. I don't understand the game that well. So
absolutely. Yes.
That's just smart stuff. You know what I'm saying, George?
That's right.
Hey, George, when you were in Edmonton, did you, were you friendly with any Eskimos?
Oh, yes. It's funny because when Danny Matosha coached the Eskimos, when I was 15 years old, I had to make a choice between football and hockey. And Danny was my coach. I was playing the AAA for the Cougars in Montreal. And he said, George, you'll never make it to the NHL. You got to play football. Black guy don't play hockey. So when I played the Edmonton Oilers, he was coaching the Eskimos. So I went to see Danny Machocha, and I said, "You remember when we were 15, you told me I would never going to make it?" He said, "Yes, I knew you were going to come and bring it up. You remember like it was yesterday."
That's wild, though, because obviously you know Danny Machocha, Mike.
Pretty good.
Yeah.
That's kind of crazy. George, how you doing? How you feeling mentally now? You've been through hell and back. You're survived it. You're also, a really positive guy, but it can wear on you, and it can, you can have. I'm not saying that you would have PTSD at this point, but there's people that will suffer from serious post-traumatic stress because of this awful experience they had.
Yeah, but to be honest with you, I never feared for my life, and I knew that I was going to be okay with it. The people in my room that were much older that were suffering, some of them, I don't think they're going to make it. It's another story. But because I'm young, the first 2 days were a bit rough. I needed oxygen, but after that, because I'm asthmatic, but after that, it was fine, and I'm close to 100% now. And what it does, it brings me a dose of humility to be more careful in the future. But no, I'm not. I was never afraid for my life at that time, but I wanted to educate and talk about it so then people that thought like me that it was never going to happen to them, that it were invincible, just to be more careful so they don't put themselves in the same situation. Because what I was most afraid of is not me, is the people around me that I saw while I was infected that could have been way worse than I was. That's what I was thinking about. And thankfully, all the people that I saw while I was infected, they all got tested and they were all negative. And to me, that was the best news.
Well, I'm really thankful that you're okay. I'm also really thankful that we reconnected, because I had spoken to you for a number of years, and I miss you, man, because you're a good man, and all the things that you're doing and just the way you're speaking about this is pretty awesome. Thanks for doing this, and I'll reach out to you and we'll chat more.
Anytime, brother. I love you, bro.
Thanks. Love you too, George. That could be you one day, Mike Reilly. I could be saying I love you too, but not yet, because that would be premature, right? You don't want to be the guy who says I love you too soon. Mike, the big thing with you that I've been fascinated by, and really obviously have a great deal of respect for you and appreciation for how you took a really bad thing in your life, and now you've made it a really important thing in your life, and that is panic disorder. Can you take us back to January of 2018? Before that, had you experienced any kind of mental health challenge?
Yeah, no, that was the first time. That was, I think, part of what made it so terrifying to me is I didn't know what was happening, and I had never, not just had I never experienced any sort of mental health, I never thought that I ever would. I just thought that was something that some smaller subset of people dealt with, and I wasn't one of them, and I was never going to have to deal with that. I was, however old, I think 32 or just about to turn 33 at the time, and I'm like, well, I made it this far without having any type of mental health issues, so that's just not something that I'm going to have to experience in my life. And obviously, that wasn't true. So it was a really scary experience going through it for the first time, and consecutive times after that. It's not like it was an enjoyable experience ever having any type of anxiety or a panic attack, but after I realized what was going on and figured out how to deal with it, it doesn't scare me anymore. It's not something that I'm terrified of. Certainly, I don't look forward to the scenario where I have to feel that way again, but I'm prepared for it now. And so just that feeling, that confidence that I know that I can get through it. And if it's too much, I know who to reach out to get help. And that's also, an awesome weapon to have.
So this was January 2018. Am I correct? What were the circumstances, and what did you think it was, and what were the symptoms that you were experiencing?
Yeah. January 2018. It was actually a week before my birthday. My birthday is on the 25th, so this was on the 18th. And we had actually, I have two daughters now, but at the time we just had the one. We had Brooklyn and Cadence. We actually had just found out that we were pregnant with our second, and we took our daughter to her swim lesson that night. So I was in the pool swimming around with my, at the time, 1.5, 2-year-old. And then we came home and we put her to bed, and Emily, my wife, we were laying in bed, and she went, we were just watching a show on TV. And I turned it off. I said, I'm tired. I'm ready for bed. She said, okay. She got up. She went to the bathroom. She was going to brush her teeth. And get back into bed. And so just during that short period of time that she was gone, maybe 2 minutes, I remember I rolled over, I flipped the light switch off, the room went dark, and I laid back down with my head on the pillow. And immediately it just felt like everything was like closing in. It's really hard to describe other than to say I just had this incredible feeling of dread. I felt, panic. I thought laying there in my bed, I thought my wife's going to come back in a minute or two and she's going to find me dead in this bed. It was hard for me. I felt like I couldn't really snap my eyes open. And I just felt like I was in this big fog. And so I finally wrenched myself out of it and rolled over and flipped the light switch on. And Emily still was not back from the bathroom. That's how quickly this happened, but it felt like an eternity to me. And when she came back in the room, I turned the TV on. I said, "Hey, let's watch some Netflix. It's just I'm not tired." And she was super confused. Like, "I thought you just said you want to go to bed." So I laid in bed watching TV for 2 or 3 hours. She eventually fell asleep. But I was terrified to close my eyes again because I didn't know what had caused that situation, and I certainly didn't want to feel it again. And I was terrified, but I also didn't feel comfortable telling her what happened. And that's the person who I have the most trust in my entire life. So terrifying experience, and it didn't end there. For the next month, really, I woke up the next day. I felt normal in the morning, and then after about an hour, it got into my head. I think you were talking about this kind of earlier, where I started getting into this weird cycle where I was worried if I felt a certain way and it was causing me anxiety. And then I was feeling that way. And then I would just focus on it. It's all I could think about. And I felt in a fog. I felt slowed down. I felt like I couldn't focus my eyes, and even though I could see things clearly, I couldn't focus my brain. I couldn't get myself, to feel sharp. And it was a really weird situation. And I thought, I'm known as a very tough guy on the field, physically tough, take a lot of pounding, take punishment, and get back up. And there's, nothing that I can't do. And so I'm like, you know what, I'm going to tough this out. I can fight my way through this. And I tried to do that for weeks, and it didn't improve. And in fact, it just started to get worse. And I just couldn't, finally, I think it was about 3 or 4 o'clock in the afternoon the following day, I finally told my wife what had happened and how I was feeling. And of course, she was super worried about it. And we went around. I wanted it to be anything but mental health, honestly. I drove around. I found a doctor and had blood drawn and had all these tests ran. And I was like, man, maybe my iron's low, or maybe I'm diabetic and I don't know it, and I'm having like some blood sugar levels, or I live in Seattle. Maybe I'm not getting enough sunshine. I've been gray for a month and a half. Maybe I need some vitamins or something. And all the tests came back totally normal. And at that point, that's when I was like, okay, damn. It's kind of sad, really, because when I look back on it, and I've had this conversation with my wife and many others, that it's pretty crazy how our culture and society, and it's slowly changing, but views mental health to the point where me, a grown man, would rather have there be something seriously wrong, physically with me, hoping there was some sort of issue that I could attribute this to, that it wasn't going to be mental health.
When you were saying it, I was thinking the same thing, that you were hoping it would be anything but that. And then you went through the different scenarios, like it could have been, diabetes, which we know is, carries with it a million different things that are really serious. And it's just funny that you would say, God, please don't be anxiety, don't be panic. But what gave you your life back? What made a difference for you?
Yeah, so I'd stayed in contact with because this was during the off season. So I was back in Seattle. I wasn't going to be back up for football for a few months. And so, of course, I stayed in contact with the team, the Eskimos, who I was playing with at the time, in touch with their medical training staff and their doctors. And they were awesome with, checking in with me constantly, making sure that I was able to find the support and help that I needed, and just trying to do whatever they could remotely. But again, here's how, looking back on it, how silly it is that I didn't do this sooner. But my older brother is a psychologist, has his doctorate, runs his own practice and everything like that. And finally, we went to take our daughter out for dinner. We went to a Mexican restaurant down the street to get some enchiladas, and I pulled in the parking lot and I said, I can't do this anymore. I'm gonna call Bo. Patrick is his first name legally and his doctor name, but he goes by Bo to our family. And so I called Bo, my older brother, and I asked my wife to take Brooklyn into the restaurant. I said, I'll be in, when I'm done. And I probably didn't come in for another 45 minutes or an hour because I just got him on the phone, and he just listened to everything, asked a bunch of questions, and just let me kind of talk through everything. And he said, okay, I think I know what's going on, but I want to talk with some cohorts. Obviously, I'm not going to tell him who I'm asking about and things like that, but he was going to do some more research. And finally, the next day he called back and we talked again, and he took me through some strategies that I could use to instead of trying to avoid the situation and pretend like the anxiety wasn't there and the feeling of panic and all that, but to actually, not accept it, but embrace it and look into it and think about it and talk through it and write down what I was feeling. Because anytime that at that moment during those couple of weeks, anytime that I would start to remember what I was going through, I would try to push it away and ignore it because I didn't want it to trigger another panic attack. And I thought, first thing he told me, he said, you're not going to die of a heart attack. You're not going to cause yourself to have a heart attack if you think about this, if you accept it and you start looking into it and dealing with it. And so I started to do that. And within the first week, and I would sit there and talk about, what I'd written down with him and the notes that I was taking and how I was feeling and all this. And even within the first couple of days of just talking about it with somebody else and using some exercises, I felt like a totally different person. I felt like I was on my path back to being myself again.
And here you are. I mean, it's 2 years and I guess 4 months after your first panic attack. Do you have, besides that profound panic moment, and when I say moment, I don't mean like 1 second, but like that day, that 1 hour that you talked about, there's that. And then there's in the same family, sort of smoldering anxiety that is also debilitating. Do you experience that as well?
Well, I haven't had, I would say in the last, what are we talking, like you said, 28 months or so since the very first situation that I had. There's times here or there, every couple of months where something will pop up and I'll start to feel anxious about them. But I haven't had probably since, early, February, March of 2018, a full blown anxiety attack or panic attack, because as soon as I start to feel it, I know what's happening and I know how to deal with it and I know how to address it within myself and I know how to deal with it. And so it's not something that's comfortable, but I don't fear it anymore. I don't sit there and say, my God, what if this happens again? What am I going to do? I know what to do. And if that doesn't work, then I know I'll reach out to people that will help me. So, but I don't think anybody's going to go through their life without having anxiety to some degree. And so I still live with anxiety every single day. I think everybody does, especially with COVID-19 and everything that's going on in the world right now. I mean, you look at people's jobs and people's livelihoods, and mine is no different. I know that there's been a lot of talk over the last week about the future of the CFL, and yeah, it's a sport, yeah, it's a game, but it's how a couple hundred guys feed their families and thousands more that work the concessions and work at the stadiums and all these things. Those are our livelihoods, and the same is happening with restaurant workers and countless others. There's such a big percentage of our population is being affected, and their jobs are being affected by this, that if you're not feeling anxiety, then you're one of the lucky few. But so every day you wake up worried about that kind of stuff, but that's part of life now, at least part of my life.
Yeah, it is. I think that there's two separate things. One is anxiety, which is based on logic. Like who would say, oh, you shouldn't be anxious at this time? I mean, that's a normal human reaction, right? To the fact that there's this pandemic and all of our livelihoods are threatened and the stock market has collapsed and, you're worried about the people that you care about. So that's different than, to me, the real anxiety, the illness, is when you can't explain what it is that you're worried about. When it's this, and you described it, I thought, really well with panic, where you were just haunted by this feeling of dread, where you like, there was no reason why you should feel that dread outside of the fact that something brain chemistry wise in your head was messed up.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's, was the biggest, I guess, thing that set me off, where I was like, I know that something weird is happening here, something that's not normal. Because just as George talked about earlier, the anxiety before a fight, okay, we have 18 regular season games, maybe a couple playoff games, maybe some preseason games. So there's however many, 18 to 22 weeks out of the year where 2 or 3 days before the game, the anxiety is starting to build, and I'm starting to feel it and going, oh, okay, I know that I'm going to go and perform in front of, 30,000 people live, and however many 100,000 they're going to watch. And you start to feel that anxiety. That's a normal thing. You know that you should probably be feeling that. You're not concerned about that. It's when you just got done with a swim lesson and you come and sit down in your own bed in your own house, and it's the off season, and it's the month that you're supposed to be relaxing, that all of a sudden you have anxiety and panic and dread, and you go, there's no logical, thing that set this off, that caused this. So what is going on? Something, chemical reaction in my brain is causing something bad to happen right now. And that's the terrifying thing, because you can't logically explain what it is that caused it, right?
That is exactly, to me, what you just described is exactly, exactly how I see it. And I learned a couple of lessons from you. First of all, I'm guessing that your wife has really good oral hygiene, because she was in the washroom brushing her teeth while you had that entire panic attack. So good for her. I'm a dentist's son, so that is very impressive. The second thing is, would you mind taking off your hat? I want to see what your hair looks like, because during this pandemic, hair is an issue, and we're going to deal with it in a second.
Yeah, let me spin. So the other part of pandemics is, I'll spin so the lighting's better, is that there's limited places in your own home that you can go to do conference calls. So when your wife has work, she has a conference call in another room, and then your furnace is acting up, so your AC guys are here to work on it. You got to move away from the thermostat while they're doing work in the background. More importantly, I got a bunch of gray hair at the best of times, but I like to keep my hair nice and short so that you can't see it. But when you got hair that's growing over the top of your ears, it's a bad look, man.
Yeah.
So a hat is a necessity. I don't ever apologize for having a gnarly beard or a neck beard, because that's just kind of my thing. But the hair, I don't really know what to do with that.
Okay, well, I know what not to do, because I spoke with this celebrity hairstylist, Cindy Duplantis, who did a 5-part series. Today, it's number 1, and she'll tell you one big thing that you shouldn't do. Let's roll it, Phil. Pandemic Survival, a limited How Not To series from Isolation Nation. This week, how not to get these reactions to your hair.
All the folks between it, this is terrible. This is one of the worst catastrophes in the world over humanity.
What do you say to people who say to you, Cindy, I'm going to cut my hair. I can't stand the way it looks. I can't stand the length. I'm going to cut my hair.
That looks absolutely ridiculous.
Don't.
Can't really get shorter than that. Why shouldn't I cut my own hair? I mean, I wouldn't operate on myself for sure. I'm not talking about making it look the way you can make it look, but can I just do the basics and say, okay, well, it's too long here, I'm going to cut it?
Yeah, no, I would just say don't do it, because it is a lot harder to hide a bad haircut than it is to just mask your regrowth.
Put the hat on your head.
That's like the best thing to do. Now, if your hair's short like you can definitely do a little bit of a cleanup on the neckline, and that can really help to look a little bit cleaner. But other than that, get into products. Put products in your hair to help bring it down.
Part of it is equipment, right? Like
yeah,
I have these garden shears, right? And that probably isn't ideal. Kitchen scissors, and they have been in the dishwasher, so I haven't been cutting chicken breasts with this.
He's just a chicken.
So there's no risk of contamination. So why not these?
No.
Why not?
That is terrifying. So we have these scissors that we use. This is like my professional set. And I mean, when you buy these, it's a very large investment. They are sharpened on the regular. So you definitely need a great pair of scissors to be able to cut your own hair. And also great shears. Great shears.
I love that.
Oh, yeah.
I've always wanted one. Oh, man. No, don't turn it off. The buzzing sound is hypnotic.
It is pretty calming.
For some reason, I'm obsessed with that goat noise, which is still crazy every time I hear it. But that's, her solid advice is do not, under any circumstances, Mike Reilly, cut your own hair or have your wife cut your hair. It sounds like you have a great marriage. You were talking about how you mentioned that your wife is the person you trust the most in the world. Don't trust her with that.
No, I don't. I don't at all. She's actually tried. She's lobbied me a couple of times to do it. And she's like, why? Who cares? I'm the only one that has to see it. And I'm like, well, no, I got too many Zoom meetings, first of all. And secondly, I don't care if you get to see it or not. I know what a bowl cut looks like. And that would be best case scenario, what she would give me.
Yeah, the problem is you make a mistake, so you try to fix the mistake, so you cut it shorter, right? Because you can't add anything to it.
That's right.
And then before you know it, although, shaving it all is one of the things that Cindy talked about tomorrow. She's going to talk about how you can try to fix the bad lid that you somehow created on your own. You do some stuff for the CMHA, right?
Yeah. So last year, when I first signed with BC, I talked with we have a great group of people that work with the community. And that's what I told Jamie Terrace, one of our guys. I said, I want to work, get involved with mental health within the province of BC. And so they set me up with some really good people. We did a bounce back campaign, advertising for a program that people don't necessarily know exists. That's free to use, and you can call or chat over the internet online. And so it's a great tool. You can do it anonymously, but an opportunity for people to get help. And then also within the CFL, at the conclusion of the 2018 season, I was given the ability to make a donation in my name. And so I partnered with Foundry BC, which helps youth with mental health issues. And, unfortunately, because of the border being shut down and a lot of, everything being put on pause right now, I haven't been able to do the things I wanted to do this off season, but certainly looking forward to getting back into that when the time is right.
Yeah, I'd like to spend some time with you, get you on a stage somewhere, because your story is really important. And I think I'll say it, and if you want to follow up and put it in your own context, go ahead. My name is Michael LANDSBERG. I suffer from an illness called depression and anxiety. It has really affected my life. It's taken me down at times, but I'm not ashamed. I'm not embarrassed, and I'm sure not weak. The floor is yours.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if I can say it any better than that, other than to say, I was one of those many people out there that was under the impression that mental health was something that some people had and others didn't. And when I was finally confronted with the issue, and I started to realize and talk to other people that it's so prevalent that a majority, if not all of us, throughout our life will have some sort of experience with mental health issues. Whether they're severe or not, just depends, but everybody's dealing with something, and just don't ever forget that, when you walk around and you see people, it could be people that are very close to you within your own family, relatives, brothers, sisters, parents that are going through stuff that you have no idea. So when you ask people, as you said at the beginning, you ask people how you're doing, try to get the real answer.
Awesome, Mike. Thank you so much. What a pleasure meeting you too, and continued success in your, forget about success. Continuing your CFL career would be awesome, because that would mean that kind of everything is back to the way it should be. I grew up in an Argo home, so CFL was, when I was a kid, the biggest thing in my life by a mile. So it's it's really cool to meet you, and I hope we can do this again.
Yeah, I appreciate it. Thanks for having me on. I think we all look forward to just getting back to some sort of, not normal, but just being able to be together in some capacity, sports or otherwise.
Amen, brother. So thanks to Jansen, by the way, Jansen, kind of our fairy godmother or father, amongst a list of others, but they came to us and said, do something that'll make a difference with people. And that's what obviously we're trying to do. And as we say goodbye today, I got to hear one more time the end of the Sean Cullen tribute to Georges Laraque. It sounds like Johnny Cash. You think so? Roll it, Phil.
So if you see him in the street, say hello, you might just meet a friendly guy with lots of grace, or he might just punch your face. He's Georges Laraque, Georges Laraque, Georges Laraque. Love you, George.